Hey girl.
Morning. How are
Oh,
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I have been trying to get as much bell hooks in the last 12 hours or so as possible.
Yeah, I hadn't heard until you posted that. Um, and I felt that one. That was like, um, yeah. I have like one of her books. I could see it right here from my office. So, uh, yeah, that one's a heavy one.
It's amazing to see how much her work has resonated. I mean, and she was young, 69.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's funny because I saw it was late last night here when the news came out, and I saw maybe one post on Instagram and I thought, bell hooks, what's going on? And then I hopped onto Twitter where I follow basically just political activists and like social theorists. And the whole feed
Mhm.
was bell hooks, bell hooks, bell hooks, bell hooks. And it
Um,
was so like soul nourishing. And then this morning I got on Facebook and there was like one post from Shambhala Sun, Lion's Roar. And I just thought, isn't this interesting how our different social media communities sort of congregate with different values or a different focus or yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
It's been interesting to see how that shows up.
Yeah. Hmm.
Jump right in the back.
Good morning,
Hey,
everybody.
Paula.
Good morning. Jessica, are you down to the 1 week countdown now till birthday time?
Yeah, I think, yeah. It's 15, yeah. It's such a wild time. It's so cool. He's the
And
best.
okay, tell me, is it officially the 22nd?
It's the
Uh,
23rd.
23rd. Okay.
Yeah,
Because
you were so close.
the 22nd is Buddhist Children's Day.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
And it
Huh.
makes, I'm going to post about it on social because I feel like it is this thing, but not a lot of people know about it.
I
And
don't
I think
know.
it's probably there because it has kind of developed in the same way Hanukkah did, maybe that like in December, all of the different sort of faith traditions have a celebration of giving gifts and light and things like that and children's energy. So my friend Claudia grew up in Boulder next to Naropa. And so she grew up with the Shambhala community always celebrating Children's Day. And that was how I learned about it.
Wow,
So Volta has an
that's so
auspicious
cool.
birthday.
Yeah, totally. Do you know what they do, like some of the traditions they do for Children's
I
Day?
mean, some of them seem a little parallel, like giving gifts. So
Okay,
I can dig up an article or two about it to
I'll look
share
into it too.
more because since it's not something I grew up with, I don't know
Yeah.
much about how it's celebrated.
Hmm. Cool.
So I have to ask your forgiveness because today I have the dishwasher running. So you're going to hear the low romantic hum of the dishwasher throughout our class today. And
I can't.
you can't hear
I
it?
can't hear it.
Okay.
mm.
I started it last week right before I was about to film a yoga class. And I was like, oh shit. So I'm feeling extra aware of the dishwasher and its sounds lately. So I think we're just going to get started. And if Mike jumps in when he's able, that's great. Because I want to make sure we have time to finish, but I think we will have time to finish. So let me just get us set up here. All right, so we left off with our favorite versions of ourselves last week, all relating to what it means to be reactive and how that feels. But we're going to start, I'm going to see if I can move you to the top here. We're going to start with something different today, which is what does it mean to be responsive? Here, maybe I'll put you down here and that'll work better. Let's see. So Viktor Frankl, oops, here's Mike. So Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist. Oh, actually, you know what? Forgive me. I jumped right in and I meant for us to do a 3-minute sit since there's not one baked into this section of lesson 6. We don't have one till further in the end. So let's pause with Victor and just take 3 minutes to do a quick sit and kind of land. I'm going to mute my dishwasher. If you just want to get settled into any comfortable seat, drop right in, using whatever anchor you'd like to use today. Coming into this couple of minutes of just sharing silence together. All right, so with that palate cleanser, let's step into Viktor Frankl. So he was an Austrian neurologist, a psychiatrist, a philosopher, an author, and perhaps most famously, a Holocaust survivor. And this quote is one you're going to see throughout the mindfulness world because it is so profoundly influential. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in this space resides your power to choose your response. Therein lies your freedom. So we're practicing learning to focus on this space. We have to consciously claim our place in this space. It's the sacred pause we take. And in that pause, that's when we really can choose how we'll respond rather than reacting like our friend a few slides ago with the megaphone and the red face. So we are no longer hijacked or held captive by your feelings or your emotions. You're no longer kind of yanked around by them. Instead, we choose how we'll deal with what's before us, sort of moment to moment, we will be in that moment and how we will respond, remembering that in that choice of response is where we find freedom. So in contrast to reactivity, how does responsiveness feel? Can you think of any, single words that come to mind when you think of how your body feels when you're responsive? Paula, you're muted.
Exhausting and difficult.
I was
Right?
expecting calm, peaceful. I love your
No.
honesty.
No,
Yeah.
but to always take that pause and consider. I mean, that's hard work. Well, for me, that's hard.
Anxious or tense, maybe?
So anxious or tense in that space, in that pause.
Sorry, Rach.
That's okay. I love
would
it.
say, I would say like deliberate. Oh wait, my phone is ringing. I'm sorry. You guys just got booted.
We can see you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that might have been my son. I'm sorry. Hang on one
That's
second.
okay.
I'll-
Go respond to your son.
Right.
So I think if you think of a canned response here, in contrast to reactivity, which, as we all discussed, felt all kinds of intense ways in our bodies, the idea is responsiveness feels like this peaceful gentleman meditating here who's always in control of how he chooses to respond and feels completely at peace with that. And I think it's a great reminder hearing these answers, how much work most of us have to do to exist in this mode, not just in one breath, but in every breath. It's like trying to begin again every new situation, every new moment. It's an ongoing practice. It's not like, this sort of stereotype of enlightenment where you reach the top of the mountain and then you sit on the mountain enlightened for the rest of your life. This is one of those things where you tap into that experience of samadhi or connection or total presence in that moment. And then maybe you lose it again and then you tap in again, but it has an ongoing nature. It requires being mindful. For me, the word I think of is like patient and grounded. Like I need to be in my optimal state to be responsive. I need to be well fed. I need to be well slept. And I think about small children and how, the kids at school at pickup time, by 4 o'clock, they are toasted. They have no ability to self-regulate left. They're totally exhausted. They're hangry. They're tired. And in that moment, they're a lot more reactive, right? And I feel like that's true for adults as much as it is for kids. So maybe those first sort of basic fundamental needs need to be met in order for us to even consider being responsive. And there can be some privilege in there too, right? Because how do you end up being responsive if you haven't had breakfast? Or whatever the case might be, if your basic needs are not cared for and your body's in a state of agitation or need. So this requires being mindful. And hopefully one outcome of a consistent mindfulness practice is that we do end up being a little more responsive. So this is a book that has been recommended by a few folks at Studio B, and I have not read it. But Edith Eger, whose name you see in the white on the right-hand side as well, is well known for this book, The Choice. She was also sent to Auschwitz. And hours after her parents were killed, Nazi officer Dr. Joseph Mengele forced Edie to dance for his amusement and her survival. She spent decades struggling with flashbacks and survivor's guilt, determined to stay silent and hide from the past. 35 years after the war ended, she returned to Auschwitz and was finally able to fully heal and forgive the one person she'd been unable to forgive, herself. So she explores this idea of how we can be imprisoned in our experiences and in our minds, and how even in moments of hell like that, we can find a key to freedom. And I haven't read this, so I can't speak extensively on it, but I know there are some videos as well with her sort of exploring what this means. So that would be a nice opportunity to do some further research if you're interested in just finding a few clips or interviews with her. Is anybody familiar with this one? Well, then we all have a project to do some Googling in the next few weeks. So how do I know if I'm responsive?
I know I'm not.
I think we all have a default setting of not, probably.
Okay.
And those of us who manage to succeed in moments are doing real well. But I speaking for myself, no, I'm not naturally responsive as well. So theoretically here, I know I'm being responsive in that moment because I feel at peace. My body doesn't feel physically charged or stimulated. And this does seem like a good way to measure that, because, you know, when we talked about reactivity, we talked about feeling hot and flushed and agitated and tense and tight. And responsive would probably be the opposite of all those feelings. Maybe we feel less regret about things I said when I was really worked up in a reactive state. Maybe I feel more free. So what's interesting to me is we have these concepts, but we also have the words like exhausting and anxious that came up when we talked about this word responsive. So how do you think that all works together? Do these things ring true for you?
So this brings up a question for me, which I think is tied to get like maybe just kind of dovetailing the question you proposed, Rachel, because I think of someone not being reactive. Like if I'm not reactive, then I'm not like outwardly reacting, but that doesn't mean I'm not feeling really difficult, strong emotions inside. But this feels like I would not be experiencing that kind of like inner storm, maybe as severely if I was truly being responsive. Because I almost think that would come, you know, because like, you know, maybe Paula, for instance, like our personalities are a little different. So maybe like I would be maybe just as reactive as Paula, but I might like be better at like swallowing like the words or something.
That's such a great point. Like just because somebody looks responsive on the outside and they take a while to respond and measured and kind and words with equanimity doesn't mean that on the inside they aren't a volcano.
Right. Like I was talking to Jess last night and it's just making me like recall the conversation. Like my mother-in-law, it's like so cliche, but like I can't, like it like consumes me, but I don't verbalize it in the moment. I just like
Yeah. For
smile
survival
and
purposes.
try and get the hell out of there. Yeah. So maybe not an answer, but like a continuing of the inquiry, because it's I'm curious about that. Because I would like to feel this way.
Oh yeah.
You know, me too.
This sounds way better.
But I have to, you know, counter against that. It sounds a little lobotomized as well. Like,
Yeah.
And this is where I think, you know, master teachers would say, your job is not to get rid of all those big feelings. Your job is to welcome them as teachers, as messengers, as an opportunity to learn about your values, your ethics, what matters to you most, and then to use that. So I think the idea isn't to move through the world like we're just kind of brainwashed and never feeling anything challenging. So maybe you're like the duck who's still paddling under the water, but you look calm
Right.
on the surface.
Right.
I think the
Yeah.
third bullet
Yeah.
here, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and that actually reminded me of, all of the Susan David work you were sharing with us. Just like, because I think that's probably where I have like my most work, like where I have the biggest opportunity for growth is like not like turning away from those big feelings or like the accepting part, instead of like like shaming myself for them or yeah.
And part of the tricky thing about a relationship like a mother-in-law is it's not necessarily a mutually empowered relationship where you both have the space to be transparent. With the mother-in-law, there are power dynamics, there are investments that you've made there that require you to behave a certain way to keep the peace. And
Yeah.
you might not be able to say in that moment, I am so angry right now, I need to step away and get some quiet time, and then I can come back and talk to you. Because that might not even be safe with her.
Right.
And I feel like it really depends on the nature of that relationship. But I mean, if you're feeling like a volcano in that moment, it seems like it's okay. In a different kind of relationship, it seems responsive to say, I feel so intensely angry right now. I need a pause. Like, let's have this talk in 20 minutes or something like that. Now that feels responsive to me because you're not denying the anger, but you're also
Right.
realizing if I engage right now, I'm going to launch into reactivity and then I'm going to regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that
That's
third
helpful.
bullet feels helpful to me. Like, how many times have we hung up the phone or walked out of a room and thought, shit, I can't believe I did that. And that moment, that's the consequence of reactivity, right? So if we can leave a room not feeling that, then we're winning or we're getting there.
Yeah, that's the one, Rachel, for me that stood out the most when I first read this slide. And I'm appreciating everyone's shares because I think it's reminding me that, and also what you said, Rachel, about it's not about like getting rid of those big feelings. For me, a lot of times I'm noticing the response, but it's not so much in relation to another person, but to myself. So if I notice that I'm, having a big emotion about something that maybe was said in a room or whatever by someone else, I notice my response to me, not to necessarily the other person. But the fact that I notice that, like, I'm getting really angry right now, like, and then it's in my response to that that absolutely changes the entire, like, all of the events that will unfold after that. So, and that feels to me more, to use that word again that's been shared, safe. Because when I've gone to like a situation, there's in-law, there's a memory in my mind about in-laws, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's a secure situation. What's happening right now is like triggering. It's all these things. It's actually kind of not that cool. Like, it's not great. On the surface, it sucks like really badly, but like it was my response to my feelings about it that made me feel like an inner security, and it naturally made me have like move with assertiveness. And like I didn't have to overthink like, oh my god, what am I going to do now, like this person is in this state, like what am I going to do. Like it was, so it feels a little less like then I have to put all this pressure like on, like it depends on what anyone else outside of me does that makes me, like it takes that away. It's like, nope, we're not going to even work with that. Like I'm just going to like respond to this situation and see how it goes, which feels like the route that I take these days. I think because of, having some tools with mindfulness and stuff like that. And then I guess I do I do regret a lot about I do a lot less regret. There's been so many times in the past like, oh, sorry, I said this less, like, a lot less of that these days.
It sounds like some self-compassion in there. And I'm thinking of how we talked about the second arrow. How many times after you say something stupid or you're really not your best self, you leave and you're like, shit, oh, I fucked up. Why did I do that? So there's that second arrow, adding the suffering on top of the suffering. But if we can pivot to the self-compassion, which we're going to do at the end of today's practice, and move right into self-compassion and say, God, that was hard. I got super triggered. I said a lot of things I wish I wouldn't have. That was hard. Now, next time, maybe I can think about this and do something different, So it's just like meditation. When you realize that you're thinking about what you need to get your uncle for Christmas tomorrow, and you notice it, and you gently come back and begin again. And try again. Sharon Salzberg says, the practice is in the return. So in terms of responsiveness as well, the practice is in the return. We keep trying, even when it's hard. And that's when we see the progress over time. Like Jess said, maybe I don't send so many of those apologies texts anymore. This is practice. And this is how we see it change, see things change. So if you can, in that moment when you're super triggered, if you can catch the pause from Viktor Frankl, you'd say, what version of myself will meet this moment? Almost like you're back in that witness observer status of seeing things, noticing, isn't that interesting? Okay, so I have a choice here. What version of myself do I want to bring into this? And it definitely takes a pause if you're even going to be able to have that beat to think that and then proceed from there. So some other tools that we can use to cultivate a more responsive mindset are the 3 R's. Retreat. Okay, so this is like, I'm feeling really angry. I can't talk about this right now. I need 10 minutes to just go take a walk and then we'll talk about it. That's great self-care. And it's a great model for other people too. Regroup in that moment, gather yourself, find your breath, regroup, center, and then respond. Another tactic can be in that moment that you're really triggered, connect to one of your anchors, find your breath, connect to your body, maybe your heart. I think it's Tara Brach who often talks about literally putting her hand on her heart. And that really helps her to ground and to come back to center and to take a breath and start over. It could be the crown of your head, your belly, your hara. I know Jen likes the hara a lot. A lot of Sarah Powers' work is hara related, the low belly, the soles of the feet on the ground. And then you could also choose a metta mantra. And a metta is in lesson 7, but this is a little preview, being a word or words that bring you into the space of responsiveness with kindness, loving kindness, anything like peace, or I wish you goodness and light, or free, 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 something like that. Something even like I am safe can be really powerful, or everything is okay. Maybe some gentleness could be, I'm doing the best I can. So on story, we're human beings and homo narratus, storytelling beings. It's our nature, it always has been. And putting narrative to our experience is an innate human quality. We do it to make sense of our world. It's why we have the Greek myths. It's why we have the world religions. It's why we have all the stories that our parents and grandparents have passed down. And the stories we tell ourselves and others about our lives, our situations, and our dilemmas largely have the power to shape the quality of our lives, or how our lives feel on a daily basis. So here's another gem from Susan David. She just posted the other day and I was like, perfect timing. So think about this. The stories you tell yourself, do you say things like, I'm a loser, I'm not creative, I'm bad at math, I'm too old for this, I'm too young for this, I'm fill in the blank. You are not the stories you tell yourself. We get hooked when we accept our feelings as facts. This is the emotionally rigid path. So the opposite of emotional agility. So instead, notice your story, again, with that witness observer ability, with compassion, curiosity, and courage. This is the emotionally agile path. So instead of getting stuck in the story, I'm too old to start a basketball league. Notice it. Say, isn't that interesting? I'm caught up in this idea. And again, we start to create space, that important pause between what we're thinking and how we react. Because these kind of stories, especially something like I'm a loser, I'm unlovable, I'm a failure, those have such huge psychosomatic influences on our bodies. So we need to be mindful of the stories we're telling, the characters we cast, and especially the people in our lives, and the implications our stories carry. In many cases, our stories frame our perception of things, and we believe that our stories accurately reflect reality. So we can use mindfulness practices to wake up a little bit to the stories that shape our lives and realize that we hold the pen in more ways than we expect. So this is a great tool from Brene Brown, and she talks about having an argument with her husband and using this tool. There's a video of her with Oprah talking about this tool, and we used it in the emotional well-being module materials for the corporate clients right now who are doing the Be Well Together series. I'm really looking at this as a practical tool that you can use at any point throughout your day. So when you're caught up in a story, we're telling ourselves about a challenging person or situation, we could just go to that person and say, hey, Paula, the story I'm telling myself about the reason that you haven't replied to my text from last week is that you hate me and you don't want to be my friend anymore because I suck. I just wanted to check this out with you. Okay, so right there, how amazing is that we can articulate it?
Mhm.
And then Paula is in a space to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. Actually, my phone has been dead for a week and I haven't gotten any texts in 8 days, right? And so in that moment, Shazam, your challenging story where I just thought Paula and I were donezo forever, like she hates me. That story, poof, it's gone. And I've spent a week stressing and feeling worried and tiptoeing over this whole story in my head, when in fact, poor Paula's phone has just been dead. I see some nods, so I know most of us relate to this. Yeah?
Yeah, that's a good tool. You have to have a certain relationship with the person, though.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
certain amount of intimacy.
I think the texting, like, I was thinking about this earlier, like, I know that kids today prefer to not have conversations, but to text. And I can't remember what survey it was, but I remember reading this study years ago. And it was that they like to respond via text because it helps them respond versus react. So they might like labor over a text message for 30 minutes before they respond because they feel the need to get it right. But I think, like, going back to what we were talking about, like, even when we're responding, there's still so much anxiety, not really in our response, but the response to our response. So that's really, I think, what we're feeling. So like, I break away, I don't lash out, I take the car ride home, and then I respond, but I'm not at peace or at ease until that person responds. And in a world of like text messaging, that leads to the anxiety because they don't necessarily respond right away. It's not like I'm having a conversation and we're debating, arguing it out, and we come to a conclusion. Like, for instance, on Saturday, I had double booked myself for Sunday. I was supposed to be at 2 places at the same time, doing 2 different services. I was helping a friend out. And I forgot that I had a special service that I could not miss. So I had to be there, which means I had to cancel on my friend. And I was going to give him less than 24 hours notice to find someone. And I was so anxious about not me giving him the information, but in how that information was going to make him feel, and then what his response was going to be to me. And so I think that's where we're getting some of this anxiety from, because it's in like the way we communicate, which is via text a lot. And so we are waiting for that response in order to almost free us from our like guilt of whatever it is we may have, done. Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
It's such a good point. Thank you. And I remember reading, like right when iPhones kind of came out and got big, about what a phenomenon it is, those 3 little dots that show that somebody's typing. And thankfully, I was not dating at the same time that iPhones did that, because I've read that people say, like when they're dating somebody or they're just kind of hanging out, and this person that they're really into, but they don't feel secure with yet, types ... and then it erases. And then that there's so much anxiety around it, because there's the mind spinning stories like, what is this person going to say? I can't predict what they're going to say. And Sean, I relate so much to that feeling of anxiety, waiting to hear how somebody's going to respond. It takes over your whole body in a lot of ways, and your mind. Did you get a patient and kind response? Can I ask?
I did.
On Saturday?
So it's funny. It's ironic because, Saturday's game day for my son. So we were headed on the road and I wanted to enjoy the game. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to be able to be at peace and enjoy this game until this dude responds. And it took him like 2 hours to respond. And I was going to call him, to make sure he got my message and so on and so forth. And he just wrote back, no, and then a bunch of memes that said no underneath it, right? So clearly I, in my brain, made the situation a mountain and it was a molehill, but that's my personality. So I do that all the time. And so yeah, he let me off the hook gently. And I apologize profusely. I mean, it was an honest mistake. It's not like I did anything malicious, but still, I knew that I put someone's life, made it more difficult and inconvenienced and aggravating. And I was the root cause of that. I didn't like that. But yeah, he let me off the hook very gently. So I owe him one.
Well, it sounds like making mountains out of molehills is like a totally normal human thing as well. So I wouldn't blame yourself by saying that's unique to you, because I think we all do it.
Yeah.
Well, definitely a Sean thing. That is for sure.
Well, that's a great example of this
story.
This story. Yeah. And I like what you said about text offering maybe more chance for a mindful response. And I relate to that as an introvert. Like, it's stressful to me to have conversations in talking about difficult topics, because I think more in writing and on paper. And so when I have to do that, a challenging conversation in person, it really, I veer more toward the reactive rather than being able to feel grounded and responsive. So I think it is personality related too. If you're an extroverts maybe really love to have conversations in the moment. But it's interesting how it's turned into a generational thing as texts have kind of taken over.
I just want to thumbs up the writing as an introvert. I was trying to find the reactions fast enough, but I'm with you 100% on that.
React, Sarah, react.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to do an exercise with that in just a few minutes. But so once we've done this, we've sort of used this script to actually look somebody in the eyes and say, this is a story I'm telling myself. Is it true? We're mindful that we have constructed a story, that it is affecting us in ways that rob us of our peace. Like literally, Sean, you couldn't sit at the basketball game and enjoy yourself because it was stealing your peace, and that we're willing to have our perception corrected. In fact, maybe we'd even be relieved to have our perception corrected. It would be a welcome correction. And so it's a great gift we can give to others and to ourselves when we can actually just articulate and check out our own stories. So you want to investigate your stories with, again, here's the spirit of curiosity, of being a detective, no judgment, just noticing, okay, this is a story I'm telling myself. Ask, does this story serve me well? Or does it kind of create self-sabotage? Am I a victim, or am I empowered in this story? What evidence do I have that this is true? How does carrying the story make me feel? And oftentimes they're very real embodied results. Who would I be without this story? And how would I feel? I feel like that one is a great example of like some of these core beliefs. I am a loser. I am unlovable. I am a failure. You know, if we can manage to investigate those kind of big stories and see what it would be like to no longer carry them, really wondering how we would feel in that moment, how it would feel every day to move through the world. So you want to consider the facts. Okay, this is what is happening. I texted Paula a week ago to see if she wanted to have coffee, but she hasn't replied. And the story I'm creating about it is that she hates me and, well, I suck. So the difference between the facts and the story are key here, because I'm creating the story about what is happening. So we're going to pick a story to investigate together. Let me check one thing. Okay, yes. So choose a story you've spun up about a person or situation. You don't have to tell anybody else. You could just think of it privately. And I want you to see the story like you're sitting in a movie theater watching the story unfold in front of you. And just practice sitting as the observer of this movie or story and see what arises. Do you need a second to think of a story? Everybody's got one, maybe? Yeah, okay, let's do it. So just coming to any comfortable seat, as always, settle into your movie theater recliner.
Grace, are you gonna
Popcorn
guide
and
us?
soda.
Are you
I'll
gonna
guide
guide
you.
us through this one?
Yeah, I'll guide you gently through it. Yeah, but I'm
Okay.
gonna give you lots of space.
Okay.
So settle in. You could even imagine yourself kind of settling into your movie theater seat, hands on your thighs, or maybe in your lap, or maybe your hand on your heart, if that's helpful. You can sit cross-legged if that feels good, or maybe place your feet on the floor, grounded, feeling the soles of your feet connect with the foundation beneath you. Softening your shoulders, eyes closed or just kind of gently half open. Imagine that you're looking up at the screen, and there are those beautiful red, velvety, old-fashioned movie curtains, and the lights go down, and the curtains open wide. And in front of you here, flickering, is the story you're telling yourself. So sit for a moment here and just begin to watch it unfold with the curiosity of someone who's just noticing, who's taking it in. Not particularly attached to the characters. Remembering you're just watching a story unfolding. As you watch, just notice what kind of energy might be unfolding in your body. How's the pace of your breath? How's your heart rate? Are your hands relaxed? Palms sweaty? Are there any parts of your body that are tense or contracted? And now, continuing to watch this story, ask yourself, does this story I'm watching, that I'm a main character in, does it serve my life? Does it serve me well? Is it nourishing or life-giving? As things unfold on the screen there, notice if you're moving through this story with a sense of agency and power and self-knowledge, or if you are a victim Notice if the character that is you feels free to be authentic, feels at ease or at home in their body. Just notice. And now start to explore if there's any evidence in this story that it is in fact true. Noticing the corners, the flickers, the edges of everything that's going on. Come back to your body and just again notice how carrying this story, how witnessing it makes you feel. Notice your jaw, your lips. Notice your belly. Is it loose and relaxed like a Buddha belly? Is it tight and tense? Just notice, remembering it's never good or bad, it just is. And all of these different signs from your body are just opportunities to listen, to learn. And now finally, as you sit and watch this story in the movie theater of your mind, think about who you might be if this story were not true. If it would just poof, be punctured and disappear, how would you feel? What would that look like in your body, in your shoulders, in your heart, and your ability to be fully you? Continuing to sit as the credits roll, and noticing that the film is wrapping up. Notice how you feel here. Staying with your breath. The red velvet curtains gently close. The lights in the movie theater come up. And you can take a deep breath and open your eyes and scrape the popcorn off your lap, pick up your bag and head out into the night. So how did that feel in your body?
So it's weird because it doesn't, like, the situation, one storyline kind of led to the next. Because I realized that my response is often the same, which is no response at all. So, like, I'm real good at walking away from a situation, and then I don't come back with a response at all because I'm too busy trying to either A, keep the peace, or B, make sure everyone likes me. So that causes anxiety. And then I felt like a very like queasy, burny feeling in my stomach, like physically, as I was going through that. And I had one situation in mind that I'm actually currently going through and looking for resolution on. And I'm so kind of angry at the situation and want to remove myself, but don't feel like I can. And so I feel stuck. And so then my response is no response at all, or I'll end up choking down their words in order to just keep the peace so I can continue moving forward. And so that doesn't feel real good. And then I noticed that I do that often. I do that often. The only places I'm really comfortable speaking like my mind is either in business, because it's just business, right? It's not personal, it's just business, or in politics, because I learned in politics that I'm only going to win 50% of the opinion, and the other 50, so 50 will really like love it and the other 50 will hate it. And I just had to get comfortable with that. But so I don't have problems speaking the truth openly in those forums. But in other situations, personal or like say church related, I don't.
It sounds like the no response option serves everybody else and doesn't
But
serve
me.
you at all. I mean, the way you described a queasy feeling in your belly and anxious, it's like you're taking care of the other people in the story and not taking care of yourself. And I think it's so common, especially in church worlds. And we could talk about that, like church dynamics and keeping the peace and all of that and conflict. But I would venture most of us didn't grow up learning a healthy approach to conflict in a moment like that. Like the coping tool of just pulling away or swallowing it is a survival tactic. And the tricky thing about it is in the end, it doesn't serve us, does it? It doesn't serve you when you do it. I'm going to be quiet there. Does anybody else want to
Well,
respond or jump in?
it strikes me with this lesson in particular that it's like such a superpower that we have to do this storytelling stuff. Like there's not another species that does it. And Sean, when you were sharing like that moment where you're like, I do that a lot. I'm like, look at that superpower go. You know, it's like my cat does whatever it does a lot. Like he'll, you know, go like that every time I go to pet him. I'm like, we've done this. You love getting pet. Like, how is it, you know, but it's still like, he does it a lot, but he doesn't have the superpower that knows that he does it. And so it just strikes me like, and even in the meditation, I was like, that like feeling, it was like little nauseous feeling. Maybe also I've had too much coffee this morning already, but but then like I was just like, work with this, like work with the superpower, because it's absolutely unique, and we're the only ones, to our knowledge, I think so far, that have it. So that's what's kind of coming to mind with this lesson.
Sean, if I can ask, on the last question we did, which said like, picture this story no longer being true, how would that feel? So if instead of swallowing in that moment, you spoke up with a fierce love and spoke your truth, how does that feel?
So there's always a feeling that I get when I finally face a fear, like let's just say I'm not feeling good and I'm like, I really should go to the doctor, something's wrong, but I don't want to know it's wrong if it's wrong, so I'll pretend that I'm all right, whatever. And then I do something as simple as call, like make the appointment. And after I hang up the phone, I haven't been to the doctor, I have not been examined, I've not been diagnosed, nothing. But even after I make the call, there's this complete sense of relief mentally, which oddly, or maybe not oddly, as I've been learning, but then the physical ailment, it's like unnoticeable or gone. So I don't know if there's a connection. I don't know, but that's the feeling when you asked that question that I felt that just, I don't know if it's adrenaline. I don't know I don't know what it is, but there's like almost like a physical feeling that comes over my body in those moments. And like my chest feels lighter. I feel like I could breathe more deeply. I could feel, almost like physically feel, my mind uncloud. And then my energy levels rise and I'm back in action. Like I'm normal again.
No longer stuck on the side of this insurmountable task,
Right.
which now is gone. Yeah, you described that really beautifully. I really relate to that.
Sean, I really identify with what you said, and just the feelings that series of thoughts produces, because I pretty much reside in the same place. I find that I play scenarios like the movie scenario forward, and it'll be scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario, and it's me trying to figure it out, which produces the exact same series of like sort of emotional responses. And when you said it's not true, it was like, oh, well, that's a relief. So then I don't have to do that, right? It's like, well, that energy can be saved. So it's probably, I probably sort of sit in the same kind of survival space, but it tends to be more of that scenario flipping till I get to the right answer, or right answer in my head, than anything else.
Yeah.
It's amazing Sarah,
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Sarah. I was just going to say, it's amazing how much energy goes into this, right? As you were talking, Mike, I just was thinking of how much energy goes into all those different future possible situations. It's real in our bodies.
It's very, very, very real.
Mhm. I think that was what was striking, how fast my body reacted when like the story was so ready to like do its work, like so ready. It was just like, oh, okay, you want to go here, fine. And the last step of like, what would it feel like if it just went away? Like my body was just like stuck with the feeling, and I wasn't able to, like I couldn't like just release it, which is what happens with this particular story. Like it's just something that I'm like constantly carrying. So it was like a little disappointing that even in an exercise like this, where I was like very aware of what was happening, my body was like, no, like this is almost like, it's like, no, this is just like how we are, remember, like this is normal or baseline.
There's a word in Sanskrit called granti, and it means like the knots or the holding patterns in our psychological knots. And I thought of that as you talk, Sarah, like just this knotted up energy that you'd love to just see melt, but it doesn't work that way. And the idea is that's why we do movement practices like yoga, because over time, and even in the course of one practice, you can unfurl those knots and unravel them so they can dissolve. Because otherwise it is easy to walk through our lives with these like energetic tumors, right, that are blocking our energy and keeping the prana, the life force, from flowing, and us being our most relaxed, most at ease, most authentic selves. So we're almost out of time, but I think we have just enough time for this. Kristin Neff is very famous for her work in self-compassion. Definitely follow her if anything related to self-compassion resonates with you. And this is a little micro practice or inquiry that you could use when you're feeling overwhelmed by feelings or highly triggered, or in that moment when you can't get rid of the knots that you're feeling, even after watching a story in the movie theater. So 3 steps. Just first, acknowledge I'm suffering here. Wow. Or this is really hard. Or I am struggling now. That's it. Just acknowledge that things are hard. And then 2, connect to common humanity. Think to yourself, in this moment of realizing my suffering right here, I know that there are so many others out there on this planet who are suffering in similar ways, or who have suffered in similar ways. I'm not alone. And then 3rd, be kind. Offer yourself so much gentleness. Tell yourself, in this moment, I accept that I'm not alone in my suffering. And I hold this suffering kindly and with tenderness. And this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, when we can meet that with the self-compassion instead of with a second arrow, that, when you're already suffering and then you beat yourself up for suffering, it's double the suffering, right? But if you can counter it with a self-compassion break, you can start to dissolve some of it and just sit with the suffering as it is and know you're not alone, and sit with it with tenderness instead of with additional self-judgment. And in a world record, that was the last slide, which means we actually finished the whole lesson on time. Well done, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I wish you beautiful holidays. Some of us will be in Hawaii. And
Ooh.
if that's you,
Ah,
please drink a pina colada for us.
Thank you.
Your, frozen beverage of choice on the beach.
Yes. Yes.
And
Thank you.
yeah, whatever you're doing, whether it's Hawaii or Northeast Pennsylvania, I hope it is gentle. I saw this somewhere in a tweet. Somebody's therapist said, I'm not going to wish you happy holidays. I'm going to say, may you have gentle holidays. So that whether they're difficult or whether they're wonderful, there's gentleness there. So I think that's a really great way to move into the next few weeks.
Well, I won't be in Hawaii, but I'll definitely have the drink. So enjoy.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much, Rachel. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Beautiful
everybody.
class.
Great work.
Guys, have a good day.
Enjoy
See
your
you later.
day. Bye.